회사가 그걸로 했어요. 국제 비즈니스 내는 그걸로 갔어요.
So last class we talked about the advantages of going abroad, and we started talking about competitive advantage. So we saw the two main ways of getting a competitive advantage: differentiation and cost. We looked at the Porter value chain. So we saw some examples of creating a competitive advantage. For example, in operations, we have defect-free products, products with no problems, right? So you can have a better quality product. So does competitive advantage stay the same? If we have a competitive advantage today, are we sure we'll have this competitive advantage next year? Or not sure? Not sure. So competitive advantage evolves. Evolve means change. So how does it change? From the outside or from the inside? So we can be more creative and innovative than other companies. So we can make some new technology or new innovation ourselves. But on the other hand, customers can change. Customers' demand can change. Our competition can change. Prices can get cheaper. A new technology can come in and change the market. Okay? So an obvious example is the VCR. People don't use VCRs anymore. Do you understand VCR? VCR was you hold video, you push in the video, and it turns around the tape. Okay? So when they invented the DVD, people use the DVD player, not the VCR. So they don't want the VCR anymore. So maybe as Sony, you had a competitive advantage with the VCR, but then the technology changes, customer demand changes, your competitive advantage is finished. You need to do something to change. Okay? So some firms are faster and more efficient in exploiting change than other firms. So an example of a firm which was not very good at exploiting change was Fuji. It's a Japanese company that made the film and the camera. Okay? So customers wanted digital cameras because they wanted to see the picture immediately. But Fuji was very slow. They didn't realize that people would want the digital camera so much. They thought that people will still want to develop their photographs. Maybe you guys are too young, but when I was younger, we had to go to the pharmacy with the film, and then you had to wait 3 days to go back and collect your photographs, right? So Fuji continued to make this kind of thing, and it had some problems. Whereas other companies were quicker to change. Some companies also have different resources, so it's easier for them to change quickly compared to the other companies. Maybe a company like Sony, they already have some other digital business, then they can change quickly. But Fuji maybe doesn't have another digital business, they can't change very quickly. So, if you work in marketing for your company is going to want you to help them in this area. So, one of your jobs will be to identify the differentiation potential. How can or should you make the product different what kind of competitive advantage should your company make? So we have to look at our customers. By what criteria do they choose? What motivates them? We have to look at our product. What need does it satisfy? So we'll talk about a little bit later in the course. Maybe we'll look at an example of a questionnaire for business to business. So you meet your business customer. For example, you're selling copper. Do you understand copper? And your customer wants to buy copper. So you want to talk to them. Why do they choose the copper? Okay, what are they using the copper for? So you find out from the customers. This is kind of marketing task. Find out from the customers. What exactly do they want? Okay? Why do they choose a certain company over another? So then we find out what the customer prefers, and we try to match this with our product. Does our product have this kind of attribute? Attribute means something you have. So attribute of a product is its good quality, right? So you can also have attributes for people. For example, you speak English very well, that's an attribute for you. So does your product have the right attributes that the customers prefer? If you're Fuji and you have the film is developing, do people want to have this old-fashioned photograph? No, right? So your product doesn't match what the customer prefers. So if Fuji were doing their marketing correctly, they would have been talking to the customers and finding out that their product attribute doesn't match the preference of the customers, right? So we have to change. What price premiums do the product attributes command? So my product is slightly better than the competition. For example, my copper, it can bend more than the other copper, right? But how much is the customer going to pay for this extra attribute? We need to find this out. And then what motivates the customer? Why does the customer behave the way they are? So here we could have, for example, I'm a Korean supplier. Maybe my customer is from China. So is my customer very nationalistic? They prefer to use Chinese companies because they're also Chinese, right? So we want to find out something about our customer and what motivates them. Why do they behave the way they do? Then when we find out this information, we need to make a differentiation strategy. Look at our product attributes. So we're going to do this in a small case study with Sony, PlayStation later. What are our attributes? What is the strong point of our product? So where are we going to position our product? How are we going to make the differentiation? Select the target customer group. Ensure that these customers like our product, they're compatible with our product. And then, do we get enough benefit from differentiation, or does it cost too much for differentiating our product? So, the marketing team will do this kind of job, finding out the information from the customers, matching the product with the customer preferences. Then the strategy team is going to do this part, right? The strategy team will then decide, well, what direction are we going to take with our product? Where will we go next? We need to make our differentiation and select the customers. So this then is the relationship between resources. Our resources, what we have. Could you give me an example of customers' resources? Money. We have a lot of cash. Another example of resources. Time. Anything else? human resources, people, right? We can have better technology, that kind of thing. So here we can see resources, human. They have specialized skills and knowledge. Motivated. So our staff is better than the other staff. Countries like Korea and Ireland are known for their human resources because they don't have oil. Or Denmark, right? Does Denmark have any oil? It does. Does it have much oil?
Well, Greenland has, and that's why Denmark has Greenland as its part.
I see.
So basically, we do.
Yeah.
What other resources does Denmark have?
Just Denmark. They have a lot of pork. They have a lot of pork.
Pork, right? Russia has a lot of resources, right? Oil and timber and other minerals. China has a lot of resources, but Korea or Ireland, maybe I'm not sure about Denmark, don't have much resources. So they are famous for their human resources, right? So you can see that many US universities or companies are interested in attracting the human resources from Korea or from Ireland to their country or their company from Denmark. So then we have intangible resources like technology, reputation and culture. And tangible resources, financial, money, physical things like our company owns land. So we look at our capabilities. We look at what is the important success factor in the industry. What do we need to be successful in this industry? We join our company's capability with what we need to be successful in the industry. This helps us to make a strategy for our making a competitive advantage. If you work in the company, do you prefer to work on the strategy team or the marketing team? Which job do you like better? This one, selling to the customers, finding out the information from the customers, doing market research, or this one, taking the market research, matching it with your company and the industry to make a strategy. What do you prefer? Some people prefer strategy, right? Some people prefer the marketing. So anyway, we need to work together to make a competitive advantage. If our company doesn't have any competitive advantage, are we going to survive in the long term? No, right? Some product will be a lower cost, some product will be a higher quality. So our product is going to disappear. So we have to continuously try to make a competitive advantage. So let's discuss this question about taking a competitive advantage abroad or international, right? So discuss with your partner. Do firms always have the same competitive advantage in different countries? Right? If not, can you give an example? Think about some companies or products. What's their competitive advantage? Do you think that it's the same in different countries? Or different in different countries? Can you sit up here? We can discuss together. Okay, so then let's ask the guys over here, what do you think? Yes?
Many countries have each culture.
Yes?
Because for example, population or population, currency, etc.
So every country's culture is different, right? So you think the firm could have a different type of competitive advantage in a different country because of the culture?
Yes.
Can you give an example of any product that's sold in different countries and has a different competitive advantage? Can anybody give an example of a company which has a different competitive advantage in a different country? Yes?
Okay, we were talking about IKEA. In Scandinavia, they do have a lot of competition, but it's really cheap, and then the cultural background of Scandinavians.
And the design.
Yeah, for the design is
The design is well made for Scandinavia.
yeah, they just really accept it because it goes from their cultural background. But if
you, for example, go to Asia, then you have to change some features of the furniture.
or maybe you don't change, it's like maybe doesn't change, but in Korea, probably since Koreans don't have cultural background like Scandinavians, really easy design and basic and
Or maybe different marketing strategy for them.
so they don't accept it so easily as Scandinavians.
So do you mean that you're explaining that it's a lot of competition and it's a lower cost in Scandinavia?
Yes.
IKEA?
And we think that in Korea there are not so many competitors for this kind of furniture.
So maybe in Korea it has more of a or China it has more of a differentiation advantage. It's different than the other products. People like to design more. That kind of thing, right?
And here they buy it more mainly for design.
Okay. So even their marketing might be different. They might, in China, they might make more luxury kind of type of middle class or luxury products, right? In Scandinavia, it might be more aimed at students and young professionals. So we just have to realize that even though we have a product which we sell, we have to recognize that our competitive advantage might be different depending on the country we're going to. So next question is about national brands. Competition. So when we are going to another country, one of the problems is that usually there is another company which is selling that in the country, right? And it's a national brand, it's from that country. So Question is, does your national brand or made in your country affect your decision to purchase? If so, what kind of products and services? So in Ireland we have this, it's Guaranteed Irish. It's a G, a green G, which you stamp on product. It means that it's made in Ireland. Most of the product is made in Ireland, right? In the US they also have a Made in America, the American flag they put on their products. So companies do this because they think people might buy the product because they know it's made in Ireland or they know it's made in America. So they think they're supporting the jobs in Ireland, supporting the industry in their country. But what about you? So discuss with your partner. Okay, so let's do a little survey with the Korean students. Do you own a smartphone?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do you own iPhone or Samsung?
iPhone.
Hands up who owns an iPhone. Korean students. Apple brand. Hands up who owns a Samsung. Okay. So it seems that the Korean students don't have much national brand preference. Is that correct? What about you guys? Do you prefer Korean brands or you don't care?
I like Korean brand, but this Apple phone is better than Samsung.
Okay, so what kinds of products or services do you like in Korean brands? Ramen? What kind of Korean products do you like? You buy it because it's made in Korea.
Korean cow. Korean cow.
Cow, beef?
Cow.
Anything else? You don't have much choice in Korea, right? They ban a lot of beef. They ban Irish beef, for example.
Kimchi. Kimchi.
Kimchi? Of course, right? So what about the Russian students? Yes?
Russia will have that situation if we prefer to buy European products or Asian products than Russian. So if we buy Russian products,
So you mean high technology products, they prefer foreign brands?
Products are lower than European or Asian, and that's why people don't want to buy these products.
Okay, is there any products that people prefer? What about vodka?
Chocolate. Chocolate, yes. And dairy products, food is pretty high, but not
Technology. What about in Denmark?
Denmark, Danish people prefer their own.
Yeah, it's really when there's a flag, it really affects them totally.
It's also because people in Denmark, they like Italian salaries and lots of money, so they can afford to buy more expensive things.
So they're buying products to support jobs in Denmark,
Yes.
or the Denmark
There is
Danish economy.
There's lots of small brands, like design brands, who are making one kind
And
of
there
product.
are actually not so many international chains as in other countries, and there were, for example, some, let's say, Metro, the chain with the foods and stuff, and it's gone now because they have their own Danish brand, and there are not so many international chains as in Europe.
Irish people are a little bit similar, some Irish people, as we have this kind of sign in Ireland.
That as well.
So what about in China? Do Chinese people prefer Chinese products because they're made in China?
Yeah, it depends on the qualities. So, some factories in China have cooperation with overseas brands, and maybe it have higher quality and like it. But then maybe some factory could produce not good quality, and they'll buy it.
Okay. What do you think about business to business, not business to consumer? If do you think Chinese people would buy something from a business? Do you understand business to business?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm selling some supplies for your business. Do you think that Chinese people prefer to do business with Chinese people? Buy from other Chinese people, or they don't mind?
Don't mind.
If they don't mind? Yes?
You just, why the beef is banned? In Korea.
I think that we have free trade agreements between Europe and Korea now, right? But in the old days, they used to protect their economy by using the tariff, like high tax on foreign goods. But nowadays, countries can't use the tariffs much anymore because of the WTO and trade agreements. So these days, one way of protecting their home company is by health and safety regulation. So, for example, Korea used the health and safety regulation to ban Irish beef. But if you ask me and most other people, Irish beef there was some health problem maybe 15 years ago, or 13, 12 years ago. So actually nowadays it's quite safe, but they didn't lift the ban. Really it's protectionism, protecting the Korean beef producers. Modern protectionism takes more this kind of non-tariff barriers like health and safety. But Europe are not perfect either. Europe also do some kind of, for example, the Korean cars are very competitive in Europe. So the European, the EU will make some new regulations like for health and safety for the car. Like you must have seat belts on all of the seats, or the car door should be very thick. But when they make this regulation, they make the regulation to suit the EU car producers. So they see the EU cars, already their doors are this thick, right? But Korean cars, their doors are this thick. So they make a new rule, your door has to be this thick. So the Korean car companies have to go and change all their equipment and change their factory to produce in Europe. This is called a non-tariff barrier, right? Health and safety regulation. So it's a good question. Even though we have the FTA, some health and safety reasons can be given. Also, when Russia was having some economic sanctions from the EU, Russia also used the health and safety to ban some kind of products from Europe entering Russia. This kind of way is a modern way of actually protecting your companies. So just we can see that we should check about in the country. Are the people, do they prefer their national brand like Denmark? Okay. Let's say McDonald's go to India. Do people have a bad idea about the US? Are people anti-US or anti-your country? Right? Anti-globalization. McDonald's had that kind of problem in India, that people wouldn't buy at the US restaurant, they would just buy at the Indian restaurant. Yeah.
But maybe on the other hand, I would like to say that in the Czech Republic, people would like to buy the Czech products, but we kind of consider ourselves as trash of Europe. So they rather buy German products in Germany because they believe, or we believe, that it's better quality than Czech quality.
So you can have the opposite, right? If Korean is selling the technology product in Russia, then the country of origin effect, you might think that the Korean product is better than the Russian product. So then let's move on to talk about the competitive strategy. These kind of things about the industry is quite similar to our home country, but we need to look at it anyway, right? The competitive advantage in our own country, then take it abroad, and then competitive strategy we can also use in our home country, but it's the same for, we just have to put on the large scale, the international scale. So just we should mention this again. This is talking about competition. Michael Porter is one of the most famous guys who studies that area. So he made the value chain for competitive advantage, and he made this idea of 5 forces for the competitive strategy, or strategy. So we're going to study a little bit about strategy. So the 5 forces are direct competitors, customers, suppliers, new entrants, and substitutes. So do you understand those things? So if we look at the airline industry, right? Korean Air has some direct competitors. The airlines which fly the same routes as Korean Air, right? Maybe Japan Air or Air Asia, that kind of thing. Then they have their customers. So what do the customers want? Usually they want better service and cheaper price. Then they have their suppliers. The suppliers want to get best price for their product. In the airline industry, the supplier is just 2 really, Boeing and Airbus. Boeing makes the airplanes in the US, Airbus makes the airplanes in Europe. Okay? So do you think that the airline industry has much power over its suppliers if there are only 2 suppliers? Who has more power, the suppliers or the airline industry? The suppliers, right? There's only 2 suppliers. So can Korean Air say to Boeing, hey, give me a cheaper price or I'm going to Airbus? Right? Maybe they can, but Airbus might have an expensive price too, right? So suppliers have quite a lot of power. Customers also. Customers are quite spread out. So new entrants. We saw Air Asia recently, maybe just a few years ago. So we can have a new airline, but not that high because of the barrier to entry. Substitutes, people can take the train or the bus if they want to go somewhere instead of the plane. So we have these forces that are pushing against our company. Okay? Everybody wants something, and we have to manage those forces. So if we look at new entrants, one area for the new entrants is barriers to entry. So barriers to entry means how hard is it for a company to enter, or a firm to enter the business. So first of all, we have the supply side economies of scale. For example, microprocessors. So we have the demand side benefits of scale, e.g. IBM. We have customer switching costs, SAP. SAP is a German company. Okay? Capital requirements. Other advantages of current companies, for example, access to raw materials, distribution channels, and government policies. So let's talk about each of these. So, supply side economies of scale. If I make one microprocessor, am I going to make a profit? No, I need to make a lot of processors before I start to make a profit, right? So if you look at the world, the microprocessors got a lot cheaper over the last few years. One of the reasons is the companies can make and sell so many microprocessors, so it's very cheap. Microprocessor is a small thing which goes into the computer. So if I start making microprocessors now, my price is going to be like microprocessors 10 or 15 years ago. Very expensive, right? So they make millions and billions of microprocessors. So I'm going to have to start making millions and billions of microprocessors. So is it easy to enter this business? No, right? This is a barrier to entry. I need to make a lot of these things if I want to be successful and have a low price. Then on the other side we have demand side benefits of scale. So then we have customer switching costs. So we have SAP, which is a German company. So SAP make an enterprise resource planning software, and their customer signs up with SAP to do their enterprise resource planning. Do you understand enterprise resource planning? Have you studied that before? Enterprise resource planning means I can tell how much I have at any time. For example, the army uses enterprise resource planning. It's like a system, technology system, where the army can say, at this time, I have this much supplies, this much food, and this much whatever, right? So SAP makes this type of computer system. And it tells the army exactly when they need to order more food and so on. So if the army wants to change from SAP to another company, it's very difficult because the technology is specific for SAP and they already set up all their system to suit the SAP. So they can't switch easily to another company. So SAP do that on purpose. They make it hard to switch once you start with them. Capital requirements. If you build a factory, you need a lot of money. Do you think it's easy to enter the iron making industry? Making steel or iron? No, you need millions of dollars to build a steel factory. Okay? And you also need to make a lot of steel before you make money. Some companies have, for example in Russia, paper company could be next to the forest. So they have access to raw materials. So it's not easy for me to sell paper in Russia because Russia already has a very cheap source of paper, trees and paper. Distribution channels. So in Japan and Italy, the distribution channel is quite complicated. They prefer to help the local companies. So, and there's a lot of middlemen. We'll talk about it later. So you have to try and find a way to get into the distribution channel. And government policy. We just gave an example of Korean government, which doesn't allow the Irish beef, right? So these things can all stop your companies from entering the market. So we have to look at these things, look at the competition and say, is it worth, can we enter, right? Are these barriers too high to enter? Or is it low? Barrier means like fence or something stopping you. So let's have a question about this. So discuss with your partner, does coffee retailing, coffee shops have a high barrier to entry? And how did Starbucks stop new competitors after it entered Korea? How can it?
제 생각에는
Okay, so let's ask these two guys here. Does coffee retailing have high barrier to entry? What do you think? Do you have to sell a lot of coffee? No. Do you have to buy a lot of coffee? Beans? Can the customer switch easily? Do you have to spend a lot of money to make a coffee shop? Do you need some special access to raw materials? Is there a bad government policy? What do you think? Is it easy to start a coffee shop or not easy? Not easy? Why not? Which is easier to start? A coffee shop or a microprocessor company? We're talking about relatively easy. Is it relatively easy or not relatively easy to start a coffee shop? Compared to starting another type of company. It's relatively easy, right? So Starbucks entered the Korean market. It's relatively easy. They make the rent, they buy some equipment and so on. Okay? So Starbucks wants to make, once you're in the market, the better barriers to entry you can make, the less competitors you're going to have. So the question is, how can Starbucks create a barrier to entry? Okay, it's not an easy question. Can anybody answer this question? There are many other Korean coffee shops, right? But people still shop in Starbucks, even though it's more expensive, right? And how can they create some barrier to entry? Korea. Yeah, how can they create some barrier to entry for their competitors to compete against Starbucks?
It is located in the place which is easy to approach.
Okay. That's a kind of advantage, right? So I'm talking about, right? Maybe it's a difficult question. This one here, capital requirements. So Starbucks spend a lot of money on their store. They design the store very well, okay? They also spend a lot of money on the product, like the coffee beans, so on. This is the highest quality one, right? So then if I want to compete with Starbucks, I need to spend more money. So it's not that easy to compete with Starbucks. They try to make capital requirements. So how much do they spend on their store? The inside of the store, right? Then you want to start a coffee shop, you can't just put in a desk and 2 chairs. You can't compete with Starbucks, right? They have a very comfortable interior with all those things and Wi-Fi and the best quality coffee beans. So even though the barrier to entry is not very high, the company can come in, right, easily. So Starbucks can easily enter, and then they can try to make a barrier to entry afterwards. So we'll talk about these 3 strategies, general strategies, in the next class. You should have got this page, which we'll also discuss in the next class. It's a 2-hour class. Okay. So we're going to discuss a case study about Sony and the PlayStation, and just try to read the case study. You can see the questions at the bottom. We'll just quickly go through the case study in the next class, right? There are some technological words, so you don't have to read everything. Do you know how to skim read in English? How do you skim read in English? So, yes, you read maybe the introduction, the conclusion. Then you read the first sentence of each paragraph. Okay, then you can see if the paragraph is interesting or not, and then you can just look through the paragraph quickly, right? After that. So you can just skim read, and we'll talk about it in the next class. Do you have any questions about what we studied today? A little bit about competitive advantage and then strategy. Okay, then let's finish there for today. Yes.